Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's the era of Atmanirbhar Bharat. This engineering marvel that you are seeing on your screens is a testimony that India is a major stakeholder in global world power. INS Vikrant is the largest ship ever made in India by Indians, and it is the biggest nightmare for our enemies. This 262 meters long and 62 meters wide beast of a ship consists of 14 decks with over 2,000 compartments which can carry around 1,600 sea warriors and has been built at an overall cost of close to 20,000 crore. It's not only a floating city but a floating airfield as well. Prime Minister Modi said that this aircraft carrier is a testimony of Atmanirbhar Bharat. Listen in to what the Prime Minister had to say this morning when he unveiled this world record setting ship.
विक्रांत विशाल है, विराट है, विहंगम है। विक्रांत विशिष्ट है, विक्रांत विशेष भी है। विक्रांत केवल एक युद्धपोत नहीं है, ये 21वीं सदी के भारत के परिश्रम, प्रतिभा, प्रभाव और प्रतिबद्धता का प्रमाण है।
But with the arrival of one of the biggest disruptors in maritime history, the fight for credit too erupted. Congress termed that INS Vikrant is a collective effort of all governments since 1999, but the Prime Minister ignores the continuity in governance. On the other hand, taking a swipe, Owaisi said that with the commissioning of the new ship, Prime Minister will finally have the courage to address the China issue. Listen in to Asaduddin Owaisi.
I am very much surprised and saddened that the Prime Minister of our country and his government is not willing to sanction a third aircraft carrier, which is very much needed for our country. This clearly shows that the economy, Indian economy, has been destroyed under the stewardship of our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi.
इंडियन नेवी के डिज़ाइनर जो हैं, इंडियन नेवी के इंजीनियर हैं, इंडियन नेवी के अफसर हैं, कोचिन शिपयार्ड में जो लोग काम करते हैं, 20-22 साल लगे हैं डिज़ाइन करने में, मैन्युफैक्चर करने में, ट्रायल करने में। आज के प्रधानमंत्री तो फोटो लेंगे, बड़े बड़े भाषण देंगे और कहेंगे मैं आया 2014 में ये सब शुरुआत हुई। ये बिल्कुल गलत है, ये बेबुनियाद है।
INS विक्रांत तो प्रतीक है कि हमारे सामरिक समृद्धि का, ताकत का। और प्रधानमंत्री जी को ज़रूर पता होगा कि 2009, 11 और 2013 उनके आने से पूर्व 3 महत्वपूर्ण माइलस्टोन्स, अगर अपने भाषण में उसका भी जिक्र करते तो एक बृहद संदेश जाता।
But can the Congress really claim its credit right on INS Vikrant? Congress says that it's a collective effort since 1999, but UPA's defense minister in 2014 in Parliament had said that the government does not have any money for defense modernization. The Congress said that AK Antony launched INS Vikrant in 2013, but the reality is that only phase 1 contract out of 4 was signed. Congress claims that the original INS Vikrant that served us well in 1971 war, but it was Vajpayee government that initiated this project of INS Vikrant. The opposition also claims that self-reliant India existed even before 2014, but conveniently forgets Rajiv Gandhi and his family used INS Vikrant's predecessor, INS Virat, as a getaway ship for their vacation in 1987. India is not only turning the tide in its favor, but is also shedding the signs of slavery. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, Indian Navy got a new ensign too. The new ensign drops the St. George's Cross and introduces Indian Navy crest on a navy blue background enclosed in an octagon representing the royal seal of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, a departure from the colonial mindset. Listen in to what the Prime Minister said.
भारतीय नौसेना को एक नया ध्वज मिला है। अब तक भारतीय नौसेना के ध्वज पर गुलामी की पहचान बनी हुई थी, लेकिन अब आज से छत्रपति शिवाजी महाराज से प्रेरित नौसेना का नया ध्वज समंदर और आसमान में लहराएगा।
Accusing the Congress party of banking on colonial mindset, the BJP slammed the UPA government for bringing back the ensign in 2004 after Vajpayee government had replaced it with the Ashoka Stamp with anchor. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings me to the legitimate question on the NewsHour tonight. Put Bharat on the backseat then, why claim credit now? That's the question, and that's the debate.
You're watching the News Hour at 9. Debate number 1 on Times Now. Super Prime Time.
And joining me tonight on top of the News Hour is General VP Malik, former Army Chief. General VP Malik, with the inauguration of INS Vikrant today, I want to ask you, how important is this induction for India's defense preparedness?
Navika, firstly, I must congratulate everyone who was involved in making of this aircraft carrier. The Naval Warship Design Bureau, as well as the Navy and the Cochin Shipyard. It was a requirement for a long time, and I'm glad that we have got the second aircraft carrier. I must also mention here that it is a totally indigenous effort, both designing as well as making of it. Almost 75% parts have been, they are Indians, and very little has been imported from abroad. And indigenization, I must add here, is no longer a choice for India. It has become a necessity. So under the current geopolitical environment, I think it's a great step that we have taken, and the whole nation needs to be proud of it. Now, as far as the strategic aspects and where the aircraft carrier comes in, as you all know, I think these days that unified war fighting concept is what we follow, in which all the three services, Army, Navy, and Air Force, with the support of civil, that is how we fight the war today. And the Navy has got an important role. And considering the long coastline, almost 6,800, I think, kilometers of coastline, we have got an EEZ of over 2 million square kilometers. We've got 600 island territories. Not many people know the number, but looking at both the in the Arabian Sea as well as in the Bay of Bengal, that is the number of this thing. And of course, what is very important is the kind of role that we have in the Indian Ocean. The number of ships that go past, both the merchant navy as well as the fighting ships. Our own 95% of our exports, our imports come via the ships. And of course, what about the oil that we have to import? Most of the oil is also imported through this thing. So it has become a very important weapon system, I would call it, along with the aircraft that it carries. And it was a requirement which has been met today. It's going to take 1 more year for it to be fully ready, because the aircraft, they have to be tested on a number of aircraft. They're still being chosen. They will be tested. But it's a great step that we have taken. And I would say a very important step that we have taken in our national security.
General VP Malik, you of course congratulated the Navy, you congratulated the Cochin Shipyard. Of course, these are very important people who have spent day and night over the last several years trying to build this aircraft carrier. But there's also political issues. While I don't want to, drag you into the politics of this, the fact is that this aircraft carrier was envisaged to be made in 1999. It's finally going to be commissioned in 2023 with the inauguration happening today. Which government's commitment does it really represent that we are seeing this dream being converted into reality?
Navika, as you said, I do not like to get involved in the politics. But let me give you the history of this. Yes, you are right. Soon after Kargil war, this requirement was accepted in the government. Whichever government, you know it and I know it because Mr. Bajpayee's government at that time.
Yes.
Then, but the full decision was taken, I think, sometime in 2009. And the keel was laid, most probably, I think, in 2013. So it has taken a long time. And it would be fair to give credit to both the governments, from the NDA as well as the UPA. But I would say that maybe the greater credit would go to the present government, which has really pushed this whole effort. And from 2014 onward, it has been pushed. And it has now come through. So particularly the kind of push that the present government has given on Atmanirbharta,
yes.
As I said earlier, indigenization has become not a choice, it has now become a necessity. And under the present circumstances, it is good to have as much of Atmanirbharta in our defense equipment and weapons as we can. And this is one great example, aircraft carrier Vikrant, where the design was done by the Navy and the making construction with the support from the Navy, it was done in the Cochin shipyard.
Amazing. As always, General VP Malik, you are straight, direct. You never leave anything to chance, and you say it just in such a dignified manner that, facts of history and facts of the present day, get seen in the correct context as they should be. Thank you very much, General VP Malik, for joining me on the NewsHour tonight.
Thank you, Navika. Thank you.
And joining me on the other side, Dr. Sudhanshu Trived, Member of Parliament and National Spokesperson of the BJP, Dr. Anand Ranganathan, author, Major General G.D. Bakshi, defense expert, Samir Singh, National Spokesperson of the Samajwadi Party, Ajay Shukla, Strategic Affairs expert. But my first question goes to Sanjay Jha, suspended leader of the Congress Party. And Sanjay Jha, rather churlish of Mr. Jairam Ramesh to begin the entire debate on the issue of INS Vikrant with the issue of credit sharing. Is it really about credit sharing? And if you heard General VP Malik, he sets the record straight even on that score. Do you think it's important to bring in petty politics into everything?
Well, foremost, I would like to say that defense brought a long gestation period. In fact, they go through several governments. And Jairam gave statement. I think petty and at all. It was about when 1999 he recognized the role of Bajpayee government. So I think Jairam was actually being extremely, what I call is ecumenical in his approach, is to say that ultimately whether it's even economic policies, they are making them fructify over governments. So to one party to take credit, I think that in a great number of ways is an act of political, I would say, opportunism, because it basically does not recognize the vision of the others. By the same logic, then now the cake and eat it too, if many of the defense forces people in General who have said that in only 50% of India's defense equipment is called as the art, then let the BJP take full responsibility. You have had only for the last 8 years. What about it? I'll give you two more data points because you got quite a few veterans of the show like Shukla as well. Over the last decade, Navika, share.
Why do you want to call Ajay Shukla a veteran?
Okay.
I mean, he's young. He's got his facts on his fingertips, but he's not a veteran.
Well, okay. apologize to you, Ajay, and I'll leave you to handle that one. Navika's really cracked there. But if you look at the defense outlay over the last, let me say, 10 years on capital expenditure, the highest was 30% during the time of the UPA. 2011-12, it is down to somewhere 22 to 23% of Mr. Modi's government. So these are critical issues. And one more point on the Navy. I dug up Navy, Navika. This is interesting. The Navy actually asked for a defense requirement of 70,000 crores. Guess how much the 2021 budget, fiscal budget? Half the amount at 33 crores. So I think there are
says the man whose party said paisa hai hi nahi, sab kuch band kar do. Abhi, there is going to be next 2 or 3 or 4 budgets that you'll have to wait for getting any money for modernization. Well, Dr. Sudhanshu Trived, is the Congress being economical with the facts? Because the issue here is not just about what happened and when the keel was laid. The fact is, Vajpayee ji thought about this and brought this thing on the table in 1999. Till 2009, nothing really happened. And between 2009 and 2013, you heard what General VP Malik had to say. Why is it that credit opportunism is just so important for the Congress party?
The biggest policy decision which Modi government has taken, it is the emphasis on the defense production. Otherwise, we can easily understand that we were the country, even during the previous governments, we were capable of making the intermediate range balancing missile, but we were not capable of making rifles and pistols. We were capable of making the Chandrayaan, but we were not capable of even doing maintenance of the fighter aircrafts. Does this thing sounds logical? No, it's not logical. We were capable, but we were not given capability, or the then government was not trying to do so because they might be interested in doing other things, that the purchase should go on and the other things should carry on. And as far as the defense policy is concerned, the then defense minister A.K. Antony ji's statement is on the floor of the house that as far as the infrastructure on the Chinese border is concerned, it was our long stated policy that there is no need of any infrastructure on the border line. That's why the China is ahead of infrastructure. Is this anything which can be refuted or anything which can be argued? I think as far as the defense is concerned, we should have an unequivocal commitment. For example, in 1974, when Congress government was there and Indira ji conducted nuclear test, we supported. In 1998, when Vajpayee government conducted nuclear tests, so many questions were raised. What was the need? Why was it done? What was the danger? And so on. And so is the thing that whether it is a surgical strike, that's also the how you psychologically deal with the defense force. Surgical strike or Balakot, you always ask the question. So as far as the defense force is concerned, whether it is empowering them with power, empowering them with manufacturing, empowering them with material, every aspect Modi government has done tremendous work. I think cutting across the party line, we should come and support it.
Well, let me get in Ajay Shukla. And Mr. Ajay Shukla, I want to ask you, there is no reason that debate on defense issues should get into the region of which government did what. The question is, has there been a renewed attempt to emphasize defense procurement in the present government? And the fact that there is a milestone that has been set today is something that should be celebrated. I just want to ask you, when every issue lands into a mess of whether Rafale should be bought and what is the kind of kickbacks that have come in, whether it is the issue of INS Vikrant, who did what and why is credit not being shared. Do you think this is something that can be avoided as far as defense procurement issues is concerned, strengthening of our defense forces is concerned?
Yeah, but I think the first thing that we need to sort of sort out in a sort of parliamentary manner is whether I'm a veteran or not. What exactly is a veteran according to you?
According to me, I thought you were young enough and therefore should not be called a veteran. And I thought Sanjay Jha was just making a pun, you know, because probably you have grayer hair, he has no hair at all. Just that.
No, just to sort of correct you, a veteran is somebody who served 20 years in
I was punning on it, Ajay Shukla, not important.
No, but the people who are listening to you on this show will not understand that you're punning. So let's just clarify first that I am a veteran.
Absolutely, you are a veteran in that sense, and yes.
In every sense, I'm a veteran.
Okay, all right.
I fulfill all the qualifications for being a veteran. I've served more than 20 years. I've commanded a combat unit. General Bakshi, of course, will know all of this. But since you've called me on your show, let's just clarify that I am a veteran.
All right.
But the point you're making is a valid one. There has been in the past a sort of element of foot dragging when it comes to buying equipment, and even more foot dragging when it comes to making it in our country. And I think that the Modi government definitely should be given credit for the emphasis that it has placed on Atmanirbharta, which is sort of India for itself and India for self-sufficiency. I think that in this particular case, the case of the aircraft carrier, it has been through so many governments that it is really difficult for one government to step up and say, I did it, because there was delay on the part of each one of these governments, and there was positive steps on the part of each one of these governments. But that having been said, for an aircraft carrier where steel cutting and so on began in 2003, and is now being commissioned 19 years later in 2022, there cannot be an excuse for this. This is simply unacceptable. This is a complete blow on the readiness of our armed forces. And without getting into who's which government and who and what not, I would only just put it to you that I agree with you that we cannot continue in this manner any longer.
Well, General G.D. Bakshi, Ajay Shukla says, let's not get into who the delays were due to. But if the Congress party comes up and says upfront that credit should be shared, then should an analysis of where the delays happened and why has it taken 19 years not also be looked at, and also the colonial hangover that was deliberately brought back, shouldn't that also be questioned at this point in time? Because it's been raised by the Congress party. Nobody else wanted to politicize this issue, but the Congress party made the first step.
Let me add to what Ajay has said. Despite his young looks, he is a veteran. Let's be very clear on that. But the point at issue is, most of us in the armed forces see the decade before 2014 as a particularly hopelessly lost decade in terms of defense acquisitions. Let me put it in context. You see, we were, doing very well when the Soviet Union in its heyday was supporting us in the 71 war, post-71, in the 80s. They gave us the cutting-edge weapon technology for the cost of bananas and tea. You see, and suddenly in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. We had a huge problem. Let us also not forget that that was around the time in which also our economy came virtually close to collapse. We were told then by the Narasimha Rao government, the armed forces were told, sorry, there is no money. You'll have to wait till our GDP comes up, and only then we can give it to you. Desperate measures had to be taken then. In the General Malik era, General Malik was just on the air, we had to start suppressing manpower to try and switch revenue from the, switch money from the revenue budget to the capital budget. I was in the Military Operation Directorate at that time and even subsequently. So then, fortunately our economy because of liberalization caught up, and then we thought that we would now catch up with lost time, because most of the weapons, Soviet weapons we had bought in the 60s and 70s were now reaching obsolescence. That was the time we were alarmed that because of the ghost of Bofors, I mean, nobody wanted to sign a defense contract unless it was for VVIP helicopters. Then it was signed in double quick time, but the replacement of aircraft, the replacement of tanks, etc., that took an inordinate level of time. I mean, it really spooked us. People broke out in cold sweat in that era. You know, the simple fact of the matter is that there were delays and delays. And because of that, the Soviet equipment, we are still flying the MiG-21s. Because there were a refusal to take decisions. A refusal to take decision that Anthony was Saint Anthony. He said, my dhoti is white, I wouldn't like it splotched by this thing. And yet every deal that was actually done, they came up with so many stings in the tail later. So the point at issue is, you must give this government credit for speeding up defense acquisitions, for going in for autarky in weapons acquisition, for going in for self-reliance in a major way. Previously, what was self-reliance? Semi-knockdown kits, completely knockdown kits, assemble them like a Meccano set. And when we asked them, okay, make this modification in the MiG-21 so that it carries a machine gun, they couldn't do it. Because we had an optical illusion of
self-reliance. Absolutely. Sanjay Jha, do you want to contest General G.D. Bakshi on any fact?
Well, I just want to make two very quick points here. And, I don't think we should try and make this into a heavy-duty political slugfest. But number one, where the Rafale jet order is concerned, and I want to go back to that, the UPA had it for domestic indigenization. It was Mr. Modi's government that has looked at actually importing it in the condition in which it is being imported today. A very blatant exhibition of, what you say and what you do. The second point, when the Chinese have actually been so aggressive on Ladakh, the question needs to be asked, why is Mr. Modi's government actually being extremely conservative in its response? Because it doesn't have the confidence in its own military capabilities to take on the Chinese. That's a fact, and it cannot be ignored. My third point, the Congress has been at the helm of affairs during the 1947, 1965, 1971 wars, successful triumphs. And let me tell you, Navika, even in 1999, in the Kargil victory that we had, it was a Bofors gun. Let's not politicize it. And the defense equipment wouldn't have been got by Vajpayee's government in 1 year, right? So it was a historical legacy of the Congress party that really came into play.
Well, Dr. Anand Ranganathan, Sanjay Jha actually talks about the fact that India is scared of China, as if it has a good record from 1962 of India engaging with China. But let me come back during the UPA era, when Army Chief General V.K. Singh at that point of time had said, and he had pointed towards the sorry state of India's combat readiness, the Parliamentary Standing Committee had also made recommendations at that time. There was critical shortage of ammunition, huge gaps in the required and existing force levels. I mean, A.K. Antony was on record to say, we are not going to go ahead, we don't have the money. And then he's also made the statement of how, absolutely pure white he was, and he wasn't going to dip his hands into any of the muck that he was possibly being pushed into. So, Dr. Anand Ranganathan, it's very grand for Sanjay Jha to say this today, that, why is it taken so long? When did the slowdown in procurement actually begin?
Good evening, Navika, and good evening to all my co-panelists. Navika, let's get one thing straight. That defense, science, and space programs, they span decades and across governments. And so every government should be credited, like for Tejas and Chandrayaan and Arjun and Mangalyaan or vaccine research. Don't bring politics into science, because then all you'll end up with is political science. The problem comes When the Congress takes it to extreme, they don't need to, and that is what is needless. So every time India under Modi accomplishes something in science, technology, defense, space, they start crediting Nehru for it. Nehru built this, Nehru built that, this is because of Nehru, that is because of Nehru. अगर हम सांस भी ले रहे हैं तो वो नेहरू जी की देन है. I'm sorry, but it is absurd to credit Nehru for everything. Of course, he was great, he did some great things, but please don't credit everything right now to him. Might as well credit Hitler for the 1969 moon landing. Or it wouldn't have been possible without von Braun and V2 technology that the Americans snatched as war spoils. Ideas need to be backed by contemporary, not historical figures. There is no such thing as historical labeling in science and technology. Great research and defense institutes and centers for excellence can crumble within years, even months. Ideas are the product of a human mind, not sanctioned buildings. I'm sorry, science doesn't live in the past. Science is in history. Second point, while it is true that every prime minister belonging to every political party that has been at the helm has contributed in a very large measure to our development in science, technology, medicine and defense. But for Congress to cry vendetta is hypocrisy personified. When was the last time they gave credit to a non-Congress government for any development? Hell, they didn't even give credit to their own leader P.V. Narasimha Rao for literally pulling India from the precipice. 2 गज जमीन भी नहीं दी उनको दफन होने के लिए. 3, it is also a fact that from importing 70% of defense equipment in the 1990s, we are at a stage right now where 64 to 70% of defense equipment is indigenously procured. And I'm sorry, but this has to do with the vision of one and only Dr. Kalam and his so-called iconic self-reliance index that he built in 1992, not any politician. 4, I hope this wonderful aircraft carrier will be pressed into the service of India. And not like 35 years ago, when an aircraft carrier was pressed into the service of the holidaying Nehru-Gandhi dynasty with our brave naval personnel forced into taking care of their every vacationing. Navika, just 20 seconds. Today is a historic day. India has joined the rank of 5 nations out of 200 that can build an aircraft carrier. We have a new ensign that incorporates our glorious naval past. Some advance to greatness, others return to it. We as Indians do both, at least tonight. I request Sanjay Jha and the Congress to stop this nitpicking and hail our incredible achievement.
Absolutely, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. And Samir Singh, I want to ask you, should you not be complimenting the Prime Minister and his government? Because for the first time since the early 90s that the import of defense equipment has begun to come down. It has been a rising trend since 1991-92 onwards, and then right up till 2021. It's only 2017 to 2021 that this has come down, and that really shows the impact of Atmanirbhar Bharat that the Prime Minister is so passionate about. Can you actually once in a while forget political party lines and compliment this government for putting the emphasis that was the need of the hour?
Navika, first of all, I have no problem in complimenting Prime Minister Modi or the BJP government for the historic day that we are seeing today, because it is historic and nobody can deny the fact. It is historic and it is a symbol of our superiority, of our defense superiority, as mentioned by another panelist. I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name. That India has joined the ranks with 5 other countries to have to build an indigenous aircraft carrier. So we are proud of what we've achieved today. The only problem, and I think before answering your question, in fact, I'd just like to point a very small thing that I think today we should be happy that nobody is cribbing that the INS Vikrant is a failure or would be a failure, or there's any sort of corruption that is taking place. So nothing of that sort is happening. Only a small point has been raised, and even in that small point, even in that statement by Jairam Ramesh ji which he's made, he's also credited, he's also asked that credit should be given to the Atal Bihari Vajpayee government as well. So I don't think you can see a better example of camaraderie if it suits, because it's not just the Congress government that is involved in this project, in the INS Vikrant project. but the Atal Bihari Vajpayee BJP government as well. So if a simple thing is being asked that credit should be given to every government who's been a part of this project, then I see no harm in this, and I think we should not politicize it. And
Dr. Sudhanshu Trived, Samir Singh almost says it in passing that thank God this time there is nobody who's actually criticizing that, oh, there has been a scam, oh, there has been corruption in this particular deal. Choti si baat hai.
All the defense procurement going on in the last 7 and 8 years with full transparency, with full speed and empowering India. Yes, I agree what Anand Ranganathan ji has said and what others have said. Our engineers, our scientists and our soldiers were capable enough. And we should not try to bring politics, but you know how the politics comes. When Atal ji's government came, within 2 months we performed the nuclear test. It doesn't mean that the capability was attained within 2 months. People remember that during the Narasimha Rao government, 1995, they tried to perform the tests, but there was a pressure from US and they retrieved. That's how the capability of the government comes. Now, the second example I would like to quote. After 26/11, our defense forces were ready to take an stern action over Pakistan, which General Bakshi must be knowing. And I am quoting Barack Obama in his book, The Promised Land, has said, based on his conversation with Manmohan Singh ji during his visit to India in 2010, that after 26/11, the army was ready, but the government has not allowed, then government, means Dr. Manmohan Singh's government, because they thought that the environment coming out of this may politically benefit BJP. But when Modi ji's government came, we performed the surgical strike, we performed the Balakot. Here lies the role of the government. The capability of the soldiers, capability of the scientists, capability of the engineers was very much there, but they need a government who can take, like for example, अरे भाई कहा जाता ना, गंगा जी तो भागीरथ प्रयत्न से आती हैं, भागीरथ तपस्या तो साइंटिस्टों ने करके रखी थी, पर कोई शंकर बन के तैयार तो हो सारा झंझावाट अपने सर के ऊपर लेने के लिए, वो गवर्नमेंट ने करके दिखाया. एटलीस्ट वो चीज एक्सेप्ट करनी चाहिए. एंड एज फॉर एज गिविंग क्रेडिट टू वाजपेयी जी's गवर्नमेंट इज कंसर्न, आई वुड लाइक टू रिमाइंड ड्यूरिंग 1999 कारगिल वॉर, यू रिमेंबर, कांग्रेस ने लाहौर बस उलट के दिखाई थी. यू रिमेंबर, बोफोर्स को लेकर वो आए थे एंड देन दे सेड माफी मांगे क्योंकि अब बोफोर्स ही काम आ रही हैं. यू रिमेंबर इन 1998, जाके चेक कर लीजिए, उस समय डिस्पाइट द स्टेटमेंट बाय देन डिफेंस मिनिस्टर जॉर्ज फर्नांडिस दैट our nuclear tests were to counter the China, not only look to Pakistan, and the Congress asked what was the need, what was the danger and other things. So the politics in the defense was always brought by others. We never try to bring politics. Again, I would like to remind, in 1971, Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji has wholeheartedly supported and hailed the efforts of then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. But unfortunately, we never received anything of this sort whenever we have taken. When the Modi ji has conducted a strike, we were asked, sabut dijiye, vagera vagera, and so many of those things. When Director General Military Operation has done the press conference, not the Defense Minister, not by any of the government.
Sanjay Jha, you're contesting even these facts?
Well, let me tell you the one factual, major blooper that my friend Sudhanshu ji has done. Have you read A Promised Land by Barack Obama, Sudhanshu ji? Because nowhere does he mention anything about Pulwama or Balakot at all. In fact, Barack Obama...
He did not say about... He is talking about 26/11. Maybe you need to go back and read the book.
Well, let me tell you. No, 1 minute. 1 minute. In fact, if you read the book... No, 1 minute. Let me put it in perspective. Barack Obama's personal opinion is that Dr. Manmohan Singh handled a situation that could have gone out of hand with statesmanship. I mean, there can be an argument about how...
Oh yes, and if that involved pushing back, Fali Major, then that was also part of not answering the forces, was also part of controlling a situation that would have gone out of hand. Dr. Anand Ranganathan, I'm running out of time. 30 seconds to you.
Very, very briefly, Navika, as I said, let's not bring politics into it. And if at all something wonderful is exemplified by that, it is on this panel itself. Now, correct me if I am wrong, these two gentlemen, Colonel Shukla and General Bakshi, are at the polar opposites of the, if I can call it, ideological or political spectrum. But look at the wonderful camaraderie between them. So we have to be like that in matters of defense and science. Number two, Sudhanshu ji is absolutely correct. his facts about what happened in the wake of 26/11 as well as the nuclear tests. But I ask him two questions. Number one, Sudhanshu ji, did BJP support Dr. Manmohan Singh on the nuclear deal, yes or no? And number two, in the event of all those horrible things that China committed in Galwan 2020, killed our soldiers, had those awful incursions and our literally going to war, why is it that our imports from China have increased to $120 billion, the highest ever?
Well, Dr. Sudhanshu Trived.
As far as nuclear deal is concerned, we were having certain concerns. And if you remember, the civil nuclear liability clause was introduced under our pressure, and finally it concluded during Barack Obama's visit in January 2015 when Modi ji was there at the helm of the affairs. 500 crore se badkar 1,500 crore liability, and at the time the supplier was not ready to accept the liability, but we forced, or rather than we convinced US that the supplier should have the liability, and they accepted the liability. That's what our issue. That's why we were opposing. And nuclear deal, ek hi baat keh dun, Manmohan Singh ji was considered, or there was a perception that he was a weak prime minister, but the only point on which he has gone out of board with full support, it was a nuclear deal. जब संसद के पटल के ऊपर नोटों की बंडल भी दिखाए गए थे कि उस समय कैसे येन केन प्रकार न्यूक्लियर डील पार होनी थी, तो सर आपने बिल्कुल सही कहा, पॉलिटिक्स नहीं आनी चाहिए, बट अनफॉर्चुनेटली फ्लोर ऑफ द हाउस पे पॉलिटिक्स उसी समय दिख गई थी.
Well, but I'll leave it at the note where we as Indians today stand proud of our forces, stand proud of our engineers who have accomplished this feat. As far as the politics is concerned, it's a parallel track that keeps carrying on. Well, let it carry on, because that's just the way of life in India. But today, every Indian stands inches taller than he did yesterday. Thank you very much to all my panelists for joining me on debate number 1.